Meghan Markle's royal love story might not be the fairy tale you've been told. Shocking new claims suggest Harry wasn't her first choice. William was. And if that's true, the entire Sussex brand could collapse. For years, the public believed Meghan stumbled into love with a rebellious prince, broke tradition, and rewrote the royal rulebook. But behind palace walls, whispers tell a different story, one that points to careful planning, calculated moves, and a backup plan that changed history. And here's the twist. These aren't just wild tabloid headlines. The claims are coming from people who've been inside the palace, who watched Meghan's early days unfold step by step. If what they're saying is true, then the Netflix deals, the Oprah interview, even the royal wedding itself might look very different in hindsight. So the question's simple. Was this really a love story for the ages, or the biggest royal strategy play we've ever seen? Let's dig in. The first shocking claim comes from royal biographer Angela Levin, who spent years speaking with palace insiders. According to her, Meghan's original focus wasn't on Prince Harry at all. It was on William, not in the romantic sense, but in the strategic sense. The heir to the throne was the ultimate connection, the one man whose circle gave instant access to the highest level of royal power. Levin says she heard this directly from palace staffers who were there at the time. They describe Meghan as unusually attentive, watching William closely at early events, and positioning herself in ways that seemed less like coincidence and more like calculation. Not flirtatious, not obvious, but deliberate. The kind of charm that comes across as warm and polished. The kind you use when you know exactly what room you're in. And here's where things get even more unsettling. Staffers recall moments when Meghan would mirror Kate's movements, subtly shifting closer to William during handshakes or conversations. Insiders say William spotted the pattern quickly. After all, he had been raised to recognize opportunists long before Meghan ever stepped foot in royal circles. His response? Polite, but distant. It's not the version of events Meghan ever shared publicly. She painted a picture of arriving in Britain as an outsider, blindsided by royal traditions. But if Levin's claims are true, Meghan's early days weren't about naivety. They were about positioning, and that detail flips the narrative upside down. Because if William was the first move, then Harry may not have been the fairy tale beginning, but the backup plan. But William wasn't the only one who saw through the act. Kate's reaction, cool and distant from the very start, might not have been about personality differences at all. It might have been about protecting her own marriage. When Meghan first entered the royal circle, many expected Kate Middleton to be the welcoming guide, the sister-in-law who had once been an outsider herself, who could help Meghan navigate the rigid traditions of Buckingham Palace. But insiders say that never happened. From the very beginning, Kate kept Meghan at arm's length. Why? According to the same palace whispers, Kate saw what William had already picked up on. Meghan's charm felt practiced, not genuine. She noticed the way Meghan studied her, copied her gestures, and, most unsettling of all, redirected attention toward William in subtle but noticeable ways. For Kate, this wasn't just about etiquette or personality clashes. It was about protecting her marriage and her role in the royal family. Sources say she quietly warned William to keep his distance, and he did. Meghan, in turn, reportedly found Kate cold, aloof, even unwelcoming, a feeling she would later echo publicly in interviews. But what Meghan framed as being left out might have been something very different. Kate, setting boundaries early, seeing the bigger picture, and refusing to be drawn into Meghan's orbit. And that's where the tension truly began. Meghan expected an ally in Kate, but instead, she found resistance. And in the royal world, where image is everything, resistance quickly turns into rivalry. But William and Kate weren't the only ones noticing Meghan's pattern. Long before Harry ever came into the picture, Meghan had already built a reputation for climbing higher and higher through carefully chosen connections. And this wasn't her. To understand why palace insiders take these claims so seriously, you have to look at Meghan's history before Harry ever entered the picture. Because this wasn't the first time she worked her way into higher circles. And it likely wasn't coincidence. Back in Hollywood, Meghan's first big leap came through Trevor Engelson, a film producer with connections that stretched far beyond the small roles she was landing as an actress. Through him, Meghan gained entry to the kind of events, parties, and networks she couldn't have reached alone. Insiders who knew her then say she was always polished, always networking, always aware of who could open the next door. And it didn't stop there. After her split from Trevor, Meghan was spotted moving into political and society circles. She mingled with wealthy businessmen, political donors, and even started blogging on the TIG, a lifestyle platform that positioned her less as an actress and more as a thought leader with ambition. Every move was upward. Every connection opened another path. And when Meghan spoke about wanting to change the world, it was never small scale. Friends described her as laser-focused on climbing higher, surrounding herself with people who could elevate her profile. So when she eventually crossed paths with the royals, insiders weren't surprised. They saw it as part of the same pattern. Meghan always knew where she wanted to be, and she always had a plan to get there. And that's what makes Angela Levin's claim about William so explosive. Because if Meghan's history shows a clear pattern of social climbing, then suddenly, the idea that she targeted the heir to the throne doesn't sound impossible. But when William didn't take the bait, something unexpected happened. Meghan pivoted, and her attention shifted to Harry, and this is where when William kept his distance, Meghan didn't linger. Instead, insiders say she shifted her focus. And this time, the target was Prince Harry. Unlike his older brother, Harry had always carried a reputation for being more emotional, more impulsive, and far less guarded when it came to charm. And Meghan knew exactly how to play to that. Mutual friends introduced them through Soho House connections, and from the very start, Harry was smitten. Meghan came across as worldly, empathetic, and completely different from the aristocratic women he'd dated before. She listened, she encouraged, and most importantly, she made Harry feel like the star of the story. But behind the scenes, some royal insiders weren't convinced. They saw the pivot from William to Harry as less about love at first sight and more about practicality. Harry wasn't the heir, but he was still a prince, still wealthy, still famous, and still a direct ticket into the royal family. And unlike William, Harry was vulnerable. He had spoken openly about loneliness, about feeling like the spare, about struggling to find his role. Meghan gave him what he craved most: validation. She told him he wasn't the spare, he was the prize. That he wasn't in William's shadow, he was the one rewriting history. The speed of their relationship shocked the place. Within months, Harry was introducing Meghan as his serious girlfriend, ignoring quiet warnings from staff and even his brother. To the public, it looked like a whirlwind romance. To insiders, it looked like Harry had walked straight into a carefully set trap. And here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because the moment Harry made it official, Meghan's behavior inside the palace began to change. The staff saw it. The family saw it. And soon, the world would too. Once Meghan was officially part of Harry's world, the atmosphere inside the palace began to change. At first, staff described her as charming, eager to learn, and careful with her words. But the moment the relationship was confirmed, and especially after the engagement, a new side of Meghan began to emerge. Royal aides, often referred to as the men in gray suits, said Meghan, quickly stopped seeing herself as a guest in the royal household and started acting like a star in her own show. Protocols were questioned, traditions brushed aside, and staff who tried to enforce the rules suddenly found themselves cut off or even reduced to tears. One insider revealed that Meghan would dismiss senior aides with a single word: irrelevant. Others claimed she demanded meetings at odd hours, issued orders in a Hollywood-style tone, and treated palace traditions as obstacles rather than duties. The royal staff, who had worked loyally for decades, began to quietly complain. Some even used a new phrase for her behind the scenes: Duchess difficult. And it wasn't just the staff who noticed. Senior royals began to whisper about the way Harry was changing. Once fun-loving and close with his brother, Harry grew increasingly defensive, combative, and convinced that Meghan was being unfairly targeted. Every slight against Meghan became a battle. Every disagreement was framed as an attack. For William and Kate, this was confirmation of what they had suspected from the beginning, that Meghan wasn't there to adapt to the monarchy, she was there to bend it to her will. But for Harry, it was proof that the family he had trusted all his life was unwilling to protect the woman he loved. That divide, Meghan versus the palace, Harry versus his family, only widened with time. And the cracks that began in those palace halls would soon erupt into one of the biggest royal scandals in modern history, because Meghan wasn't just battling palace aides. She was quietly preparing a much bigger stage, one where the world would finally hear her version of the story. And when it came, it would shake the monarchy to its core. By 2019, inside the palace had reached a breaking point. Staff were resigning in tears. William and Harry's once unbreakable bond was fracturing, and behind closed doors, senior royals were openly questioning whether Meghan could ever truly fit into the monarchy. And then came the leaks. Stories of Meghan making Kate cry over bridesmaid dresses, rumors of bullying complaints from staff, and whispers that the Sussexes were clashing with nearly every senior aide. Meghan denied it all, insisting she was the one being silenced, smeared, and pushed out. That's when the real battle began. Not inside the palace, but in the press. Meghan and Harry started building their own PR machine, independent of Buckingham Palace. Glossy magazine covers, carefully curated interviews, and sympathetic reporters began painting Meghan not as a difficult duchess, but as a modern woman crushed under an outdated institution. And behind the scenes, something even bigger was brewing. Meghan and Harry were quietly negotiating a sit-down interview that would allow them to bypass the royal press entirely and speak directly to the world. Their chosen platform? Oprah Winfrey. The Oprah interview would become the defining moment of their split from the royal family. For Meghan, it was a chance to rewrite the narrative. For Harry, it was the moment he publicly sided with his wife against his brother, his father, and the entire institution he had been born into. But here's the twist. Palace insiders claim Meghan had been preparing for that kind of platform long before she even married Harry. The idea of telling her version of events wasn't a reaction. It was part of the strategy all along. And when that interview finally aired, it wasn't just a celebrity moment. It was a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the built monarchy and cemented Meghan and Harry as both outsiders. When the Oprah interview aired in March 2021, it was nothing short of explosive. For 2 hours, Meghan and Harry painted a picture of life inside the palace that shocked the world. Meghan claimed she had been silenced, isolated, and even driven to thoughts of self-harm. Harry accused his family of failing to protect them from relentless media attacks. And the most shocking allegation of all, that an unnamed royal had raised concerns about the skin color of their unborn child. The public reaction was immediate and polarizing. Supporters hailed Meghan as brave, a woman who spoke truth to power. Hashtags trended worldwide. Celebrities voiced their solidarity. And for a moment, Meghan and Harry seemed untouchable, global icons who had escaped an archaic monarchy. But inside Britain, the backlash was fierce. Palace officials scrambled to respond, issuing the now famous line, "Recollections may vary." Critics accused Meghan of exaggeration, manipulation, and carefully crafting her victimhood. Even family members like Piers Morgan publicly dismissed her claims as lies. A controversy so heated it cost him his job at Good Morning Britain. And then came the real damage. The widening chasm between Harry and his family. William, reportedly furious over the racism allegation, refused to engage. Charles, blindsided, pulled back. And the Queen, who had spent her entire reign protecting the crown above all else, was left managing the fallout of the most damaging royal scandal in decades. For Meghan and Harry, the Oprah interview was both a triumph and a curse. It cemented their brand as outsiders, rebels, even victims of the monarchy. But it also drew a permanent line in the sand, one that made reconciliation with the royal family almost impossible. And that's when the real question began to emerge. Was this ever about love and family? Or was it about building the Sussexes into a global empire, even if it meant burning every bridge? After Oprah, Meghan and Harry weren't just former royals. They were international celebrities with a story that sold. And they wasted no time turning that story into a global brand. Within months, the Sussexes signed multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, launched the Archewell Foundation, and began positioning themselves as advocates for mental health, social justice, and women's empowerment. On paper, it looked like the perfect rebrand, from spares and outsiders to independent leaders with a platform bigger than the monarchy itself. But the cracks soon began to show. Their Spotify deal fizzled after just one podcast season, with company executives allegedly calling them grifters behind closed doors. The Netflix partnership produced a splashy docuseries, but critics accused it of rehashing palace drama without offering anything new. And while Meghan secured glossy magazine covers and Harry published his tell-all memoir Spare, public opinion began to shift. In Hollywood, whispers started. Meghan and Harry were overexposed, playing the victim too often, and failing to deliver the blockbuster content they'd promised. Meanwhile, inside the UK, their popularity plummeted to record lows. To the monarchy, they were now a liability. Two loose cannons monetizing their royal ties while claiming they wanted privacy. And yet, financially, the strategy worked. The Sussexes built a lifestyle in Montecito surrounded by celebrities, power players, and billionaires. No palace rules, no curtsies, no men in gray suits to answer to. Just Meghan and Harry, free to tell their version of the story on the world stage. But here's the catch. That freedom came at a price. In choosing brand over blood, Meghan and Harry had cut themselves off from the very institution that made them famous in the first place. And once the novelty wore off, they found themselves facing the same question critics had been asking all along. Without the monarchy, what are the Sussexes really worth? And that brings us back to Angela Levin's claim, because if Meghan really had her sights on William first, then now we circle back to Angela Levin's claim, the one that sparked this entire debate, that Meghan first set her sights on Prince William before turning to Harry. At first, it sounds like tabloid gossip, but when viewed against Meghan's past, the Hollywood climb, curated connections, the pivot from Trevor Engelson to political elites, and finally her leap into royalty, the allegation feels less far-fetched. William represented power, stability, and the crown itself. But he was loyal to Kate and cautious, unwilling to be swayed. With that door closed, Meghan's focus shifted to Harry, the more vulnerable prince who longed for love, validation, and freedom. With him, Meghan didn't just gain a husband. She gained a partner ready to challenge the palace and help build a new global brand, with her at the center. So was it love or strategy? Maybe both. To supporters, Meghan is a woman who fell in love and refused to be silenced by an outdated monarchy. To critics, she's the ultimate strategist, someone who played the long game, moving from actress to duchess to global celebrity, step by step. And that's why the William allegation matters. If true, Meghan's story isn't just about escaping the monarchy. It's about using it as a stepping stone to build her empire. So what do you think? Was Meghan's rise a love story that turned into war, or a carefully laid plan all along? Let me know in the comments.